Hi there, I'm John Mancini, President of Content Results, and I'm here on behalf of the MER Conference and the MER Immerse event today with Sandy Serkes to talk about auto-classification. And what piqued my interest in this topic was seeing the information about the Immerse event. And I'm putting it up on the screen right now. You can take a look at this event. I would really urge you to think about attending it. The details are on the screen. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about some of the things that you'll talk about at that event, Sandy. And so let me start with information from your website. So there's a really nice, succinct definition there of auto classification. I get lots of questions about auto classification in some of the work that I do. And the definition there is a suite of software that automates the analytics and classification of digital content or files. So sounds great. Obviously, that's something that everybody should have, but let me probe a little bit deeper on this with you. So first question, I want to do a little bit of like, why, what, how with you is, why do organizations need AutoClass?
Because content has gotten away from them. They don't really know what they have anymore, and there are serious ramifications to not knowing that. Legal, ethical, cost, and efficiency. In the past, there was somebody whose job was typically records manager, and their job was to know what the organization had, where that information lived, easily be able to reclaim it for some purpose, and they were pretty good at it. But then came, as you mentioned, the V's, volume, variety, value of this information, and it got away from all of us very quickly. And so now we're in the position that most organizations don't really know what they have. And so auto classification provides the glue that joins together what the content actually is or says or contains and how it should be managed or handled or tracked over its lifetime. So with that kind of meta information that auto classification provides, organizations can reclaim that control that they used to have and function professionally.
So what kinds of capabilities are necessary to really have an effective auto classification strategy?
So there are two ways to answer this question, and so I did both. The first is what are the capabilities that are required internally of the organization itself? And the second is, and I think this is what you really meant, what are the capabilities required in the solution or the provider? So I'll address both sides of that. Internally, it's fairly straightforward. For an organization that wants an auto classification strategy, you really only need to think about two things. One is, what is the kind of content that you have in the macro sense, what do we got? And then in the micro sense of what is each file? What is this? And then the second question is, how do you want to manage that information at its birth or arrival, throughout its useful tenure and maybe not useful tenure, and then how do you want to disposition it at the end? So that's what the kind of requirements are internally. And I've got lots of thoughts about how to prepare for that. That's the kind of thing we'll cover in the event with MER on the 27th. So I won't go into detail here. But in terms of a solution, there's also quite a laundry list of things you want to look for. I'll give you, let's say, the top three. One would be a strong ability to doc type, because doc type really is the essential linchpin in taking analysis further. The second is you really want to be able to customize, because every organization is different, every workflow is different. And then this one's really critical. You want to be able to process content in place or ingest it as the circumstances demand. There's many more things on that laundry list, again, which we will absolutely be covering in great detail.
Give me assume you're explaining auto classification to a not so technical C-level exec. How does this stuff work?
Sure. So my favorite answer to that type of situation is a metaphor. And the metaphor is when you go to the doctor, okay? So let's say you've, as I have done, fallen down the stairs and broke your ankle. You go to the doctor to determine, did I in fact break my ankle? And they take a blood test. It's a matter of course. And with that blood test, they know absolutely everything there is to know about you. They know your cholesterol, your this, your that, what you had for dinner last night. So they use that information to properly diagnose what's wrong with you, what kind of treatment. We're getting more and more towards this personalized medicine. That's what auto-classification is. It's essentially a blood test for each piece of content in your organization so that we know what it is, all the attributes about it, so that we can manage it properly instead of blindly and just saying, well, I don't know what that is, just put it over there. Okay, if you knew what it was and you had that blood test, which gives the full rundown, sort of almost DNA sequencing, then you would handle that differently. So that's what auto-classification does. It's essentially a blood test for every piece of content in your organization.
In some of the research that I've done at AIM, when I ask people if the volume of information coming into your organization is X right now, what do you expect it to be in 2 to 3 years? And they usually come back almost universally with 3.5 to 4X. I also ask them, what percentage of this do you think is unstructured stuff that you can't really handle with traditional techniques? And typically the answers come back 50-60. So you put those two things together, huge volumes and massively increasing variety. And you've got to figure out some way to do that diagnosis that you talked about on the front end, or else you're just going to drown.
I'm going to add one more fun question, a sort of a coda to those questions, which is, how many acquisitions do you expect to do in the next 2 years? Because when you acquire a company, you acquire their content. And that is literally the blind arrival of God knows what. And we see that often as a driving factor to get those C-suite folks over the hurdle to go, wow, we really don't know what we're buying, basically. So auto-classification is a great way to ease that onboarding of the new organization and all of their content.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because lots of times some people will view it from the sort of simplistic idea of, oh, okay, you have a field in this table and a field in this table, and you kind of do a nice mapping from this to this, but that assumes that you understand what you have in the first place.
Exactly.
And you can't do any of that unless you've figured out what it is. Okay, so we've sold everybody on this now. So what are the barriers that people are running into in doing this? What keeps them from moving forward with this good common sense that we've outlined?
I think the first thing, what you'll hear is it's a lack of budget. And I know that can be real, and it's a pandemic situation, I know. But to me, I think a lack of budget is really a lack of understanding about the impact of the problems and the benefits of the solution, because the ROI is actually very easy. When you're using automated solutions, you can achieve an ROI 5 to 10 times over. In fact, that's a fun thing we're going to cover in the presentation on the 27th. We have some handy ROI calculators that we're going to walk attendees through to say, here's how to justify this type of activity in your organization. So while lack of budget is a frequent kind of obstacle, it's sort of a red herring. Not really an obstacle. You just need the right, kind of ways around it. The other thing that I'll just sort of mention is sometimes auto-classification is almost too good in the sense that people think it's magic. It's not magic, and it has its limitations. And organizations that think, oh, this will just solve all our problems and then we're done forever, they're setting up for trouble. So you want to be realistic. Again, we'll get into what are typical error rates, what should you expect, how do you mitigate that, and how do you manage expectations given the limitations. So that's kind of the other area that's worth talking about in terms of a barrier.
Oh gosh, I am so glad you said that it's not magic stuff, because I've run in so many times to people in the content space when they think if they buy some magic piece of software and stick it on the network someplace or stick it in the cloud someplace, that they will solve all their problems. And sometimes, frankly, some of the vendors have created that impression.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the reality is that you've got to map your business strategy to your information strategy and figure out the connection points between the two. And all of that is not just simply a matter of sticking a box on the network. It's much more complicated than that.
Yes.
Okay, I would be neglecting my duty if I didn't pose a challenge to you. So I'd like in closing for you to give me a 45-second max elevator pitch on Valora. And this is a challenge that this industry has. I've often thought when I ask people for elevator pitches, it's like an elevator to the moon in terms of how long it takes them to talk about what they do. So I won't time you, but let's try a 45-second elevator pitch for Valora.
Okay, here we go. Basically, auto classification is pretty powerful, but it's hard. You need a provider that's been there before, that knows the nuances and the gotchas, and knows all those techniques to extract out the best possible results. You also need software that is adaptable. Every workflow is different, every document is different, every M&A is different. And so your scenario will be different than the company next door. In short, you need expert systems and technology and expert practitioners. That's Valora.
Awesome. Way less than 45 seconds. So very good. So Sandy, thanks so much for your time. And for everybody that's interested in attending the Immerse event, I'm putting it on the screen right now, along with the web link. I would urge you to attend. I think you'll get some really interesting insights. It's not just a regular webinar or a canned recording or anything like that. This will be a real interactive kind of conversation with some really cool people. Do you want to talk a little bit about them by any chance? Some of the folks that'll be on the call?
I would be delighted to. I am really lucky to be presenting with just a world-class team. A lot of people know Jason Barron from his time at NARA or his work with the IGI. And
he's a rock star. Jason's a rock star.
So. Yeah, so Jason will be joining us. Some people know Eric Dirk from Ernst & Young. He's fairly well known in the records and information management area. I'm delighted that a Valora client and implementation is going to be joining us. The folks from Oracle are going to be speaking about their experience. And a couple other industry gurus. A lot of people know Rich Flowers and Antigone Payton. All of them are going to be joining throughout the day, giving their various viewpoints. And all of us come together at the end. We're going to be doing a live case study with each of us playing a role, a typical role in an organization. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And all of us are available throughout the conference for people to interact directly with. So I think that's a kind of a golden opportunity to really pick the brains of some world-class practitioners here.
Yeah, I was particularly intrigued by that role-playing exercise because I think that's actually an important thing because, when you think about the different audiences you have to sell internally in order to deploy a solution like this, it's, you got to sell the business, got to sell the tech people, got to sell the records people, you got to sell the legal people, there's kind of all those different boxes you have to check, and it's not nearly as simple as people think. And then I was really intrigued also by your last session. It could go on into the night of Ask Me Anything, which is taking that panel and just asking all those uncomfortable questions that you wanted to ask, but you haven't had the ability to do it at some point. So,
well, on that one, we're really picking up from the spring MER conference where I did kind of a beginner's guide to auto classification. And there was so much response. There were so many people with a million questions. I couldn't even handle them all. So the idea was to spread out and go into more depth this time and really kind of cover the ground and allow people that opportunity to ask their questions, to pose their circumstances, and have this expert team be able to provide real, information back to them.
So Sandy, thanks so much. I look forward to the event.